Hi there, it's Alan here again, and today is a very quick podcast on how to find evidence, and you have the luxury of not having to see my face this time. Okay, so you maybe think that you don't have a particular interest in finding research evidence just now to back up your practice, and you might wait until you're a registered nurse. But I want to convince you today that using the technology we have today and having the skill of finding evidence can come in handy when you want to write essays and stuff like that, and all that's kind of important academic writing. So I'm going to focus what I'm doing today on the task one, which is the essay on the nurse standards or midwifery standards. Now I'm going to quickly flash these up just now. So we're looking here specifically at the registered nurse standards for practice. Now if you may choose the other ones, especially if you're a midwifery student, but just let's focus on one just now for the purposes of this podcast. Okay, so I'm going to look at the standard 4 comprehensively conducts assessments. Now I'm not going to look at that one in general. I'm going to focus on conducts assessments that are holistic as well as culturally appropriate. And you might be thinking, now do I do the big one or the little one? I would suggest you just do the subtopics here, because you don't really have the words at your disposal to really handle all this. So I'm just going to focus on 4.1, conducts assessments that are holistic and as well as culturally appropriate. So when I'm doing my search, I'm going to be looking for these keywords: assessments, holistic and culturally appropriate, when I'm looking through my search engine. I'm going to use one search now. You could use Sinal or one of the other databases, but this is plenty good enough for you in first year to try and find evidence on your topic. Now you could brainstorm and think about using words like holistic and assessment or nursing, but I think I'm just going to try holistic. I'm going to now filter it by discipline. I'm going to change the publication date so we've only got recent stuff. Now usually people say 5 years for journals is the oldest you'd want, and about 10 years for textbooks. I personally never use textbooks now. I'm always quoting from journal articles. Okay, so now I've read this article and this man has got some things to say, so I might go and visit him later. But holistic approach to care, and there it is. So I'm reading through this and I'm seeing what holistic means. Wellness, integrated physical, social, mental health, addresses mental, physical. So we know holistic. We know what holistic means. It's about looking at the whole person as one, as a whole. Now you'd probably plan your essay more than I'm about to start, but I'm just going to start writing here. So standard 4.1. Now put these in here to signify that in future I'm going to use the shortened version of NMBA. Standard. So this is not the start of my essay. This is the body. This is when I start to, after I've introduced the standards, I'm focused on this one now in my writing. Standard 4.1 conducts assessments that are holistic as well as culturally appropriate. Sets out the and holistic and culturally sensitive framework. So that's me introduced it and given it a name, so I've clearly identified it, which is one of the things we have to do for this essay. And then I'm going to broaden out my discussion. For some time has been an expectation that nurses operate This is from the Australian Nursing Midwifery Journal, and it's talking about the expectations there that we will work in a holistic fashion. So I'm going to use that expectation, an expectation that this is holistic way, and now I'm going to sort of in passing define what that means, which is to appreciating the whole person, their mental and physical health. I'm going to use well-being. Well-being, that's more rounded way of saying it. And their social needs, which they mentioned that article. Now I'll go back to my search. Now that chap Cowling I mentioned, he's written this here is 2015. Expected nurses, holistic contribution to society. So I'm going to use that as a double, so I've got two pieces of evidence backing up what I'm writing. So that was Cowling 2015, and the next one is Gorman, Koch. So this is 4 authors, so I will use or name all 4 in the first instance, and subsequent ones would be just the one author and et al. So this is Gorman, Koch, Fogarty, and (2015). Now I can try and see if I can find the citations for these. So, well, there's a citation for the first one there. So I want to get a citation. Go to APA. Control C to copy, and we can put this down here. I'll create some space now. And I'll just paste it in just as the words, and I know the nursing journal words and the first letter should be in italics, and I know also to indent, so put the cursor there, paragraph, indentation, hanging. Okay, so that's the first reference in for this reference here. Cowling, let's have a look at that one. Cowling, APA, Control C, and there it's already. Italic. So back to my paragraph. So in this paragraph I've clearly identified the standard I'm talking about. I've expanded what I'm talking about in terms of the the definition of sort of key terms and putting some perspective there. So for some time there has been an expectation that nurses operate in a holistic way, appreciating the whole person, their mental health and physical health, well-being. So their physical well-being, we said, didn't we? So back to this paragraph. So standard 4.1, the NMB 2016 conducts assessments that are holistic as well as culturally appropriate, sets out the responsibilities of nurses to operate within a holistic and culturally sensitive framework. For some time there's been an expectation that nurses will operate in a holistic way, appreciating the whole person, their mental and physical well-being and their social needs. And this is information I gleaned from those two pieces of work that I looked at. Now, that's me talked about holistic, so now I've got to talk about further the cultural element. Furthermore, standard 4.1 also describes the expectation that nursing assessments take account for the culture of the person. So this time I'm going to look at cultural competence. Competency, and I'll put assessment. Now, needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and I like the look of this, but I know already it's perhaps too old for me to cite. So what I might do is look at the citation tool, see if it's got any. Citing literature. This tells me who, so it's needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the aged care facility. So I look at tools, and I know I'm familiar with reducing health disparities. I know it's only a year newer, but I think this is an interesting lesson that we can find out who quoted this article. So presumably that's come later, and I'm going to search for this in one sector. I'm not sure if this is going to direct me to it, so I'm going to go and sort of cheat a little bit and just cut and paste the title. Okay, so this probably is reducing time to focus. So full text. So now I want to give more of an idea of or demonstrate my understanding of what does this standard actually mean. So now I'm thinking about the kind of misunderstandings that can occur. So the Anglo-Australian centric healthcare. So I'm going to pad this, I'm going to start talking about the fact that language is a barrier here. So I'll go back to my essay, back to my writing. Durian Thompson, 2012. I'd say this is probably too late, too early to be used, but just as an exercise, describe how misunderstanding can occur due to the very words which are used in assessing patients from differing cultures. So I'm going to round this paragraph off by saying something like, it is clear that nurses are required to have an appreciation of their patient, in addition to an understanding of the rich context within which they live. Now I need to get a little part on this now. I've got one. So I'm thinking more generally now about cultural care, and I know I've read someone called Lowe has written something about this. And now just putting cultural care, and I've got this nice quote from Lowe. I know it's from overseas, but I think it's now I'm looking for something that backs up my idea that you have to really have a really good understanding of your patient. And this bit here that Gail's written here, about the kind of the benefits of understanding the full context of your patient. So I'm quite happy that this person's, at least hinted on that idea. So I'm going to put in Low (2015) because they agree with the essence of what I'm saying, that it's all good. So that's make up the first paragraph. So I identified the paragraph, and I've kind of discussed a little bit about it and why it's important a little bit, and people who agree with me when I've made those points. So next I'm interested in explaining how this standard influences practice. And this is probably the difficult bit for most of you. So I'm not expecting you to find stuff that actually says this piece of practice is directly influenced by standard 4.1. I'm quite happy for you to find something that has a sense of the essence or the narrative that particular standard has got. So I've got one here that I'll explain to you here. So next paragraph is beginning exactly the same as the first line, the last one, which isn't a great thing to do, to be honest, but just for this purpose, let's just go with it. So standard 4.1 has the capacity to influence care or influence nursing practice. Let's use the words from the question. Many ways. With over, so I went and looked at the diversity of Australia, which there's 300 different identified languages spoken, and almost half of all Australians born overseas or have at least one parent Australia are truly culturally diverse country. Now, how did I find that? Well, I actually just Googled, and I got to I actually Googled Australian Bureau of Statistics, where I got this from. Australian Bureau of Statistics. And I'll put those funny things in case I want to use this term again and I want to write it in full. 2017. Okay, so I've established a need for this because Australia is a very culturally diverse country. It's not just about language, but I've kind of continued that theme of language which I mentioned in the earlier paragraph. Okay, so how can I talk about things that influence practice? So what I've looked into, I did a search using Google again, and I looked at the Queensland Health's cultural competency framework. Now, obviously we don't use Google too often, but when you find good enough sources, like Queensland Government, especially when I'm trying to find out something that influences health, this is fine. But don't use blogs or websites from other sources. So although Queensland Health's organization. So I found their cultural policy thing here. So which has created this framework, which is Queensland and I would make sure you have a reference in your reference list for everything that you use predates. So even though this framework predates the 2016 NMBA registered okay, so I'm acknowledging here that I cannot prove that this 2016 set of NMBA registered nurse standards for practice have influenced this in any way, because the standards came after this was created, so obviously it's very difficult. I'm happy to say, although it predates it for practice, the standards for practice, so this framework actually embodies the narrative the essence of standard. So I'm in a corporate framework. Oh. So I've had a few people ask me, how do I prove this? Well, if its influence is harder to actually show, that's okay. We can if it's got the essence of it, then, and if it looks if it's the same thrust, then that's fine. And remember, the previous nurse standards would have incorporated this cultural competence aspect. So that's another way. I wouldn't go down that too far because we're looking at 2016's, the most recent ones. But yeah, there would have been influence from previous nurse standards. Okay, so I'm gonna. Okay, there's a framework. Okay, how does that influence it? How does that influence practice? Well, I've looked at this standard. Now I've looked at this framework. This is a framework here. So this is this framework I'm referencing here. And if you look down here, one of the key action areas is culturally competent staff, mandatory cultural diversity orientation and cultural training. So I'm going to talk about that. That's getting closer, isn't it, to the actual practice. So I'm going to put in here one of the main action items or action areas stemming from this frame describes how cultural diversity and cross-cultural diversity, cultural and cross-cultural training is mandatory for all employees. Okay, you can see where I'm getting closer and closer, and now we might want to talk about outcomes. And I know, having read that document, that it talks about outcomes along with the Queensland, along with the Queensland government's own Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Capability Framework 2010 to 2013 mention outcomes. So I've read this and I know it talks about it's an outcome driven system. So when I think about outcomes, I'm thinking here about patient centered care, and this is where I will talk about that. So bringing it all together, the Queensland Health Organ Now I'm writing this out again because I could say this framework, but I've used that already, and sometimes you want to make sure that you know what this is when you refer to this or that, actually give it a name. So the Queensland Health Organisational Cultural Competency Framework, along with ongoing training and dedicated educators, which I know are mentioned in the Aboriginal Torres Strait. Is it 6.6 here? Strategies, dedicated trainers and educators. So I know this. I'm happy to say this. So ongoing training, dedicated educators will go some way to achieving better health outcomes. And if you could actually get a quote that talks specifically about patient-centred care, then all the better. And I've put it for all Australians. And that was from Queensland Health 2010, sorry, and 2013. Okay, so that's how I'd handle it, but this is just a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I'm hoping this will help you understand the way that we actually sometimes have to go out and find and incorporate what we're finding into our writing. So as I've probably shown you there, I was a little bit creative with the way that I used words, and also I didn't always necessarily take the first thing that came to me, and I tried to look to see who else had quoted these documents or these articles. So I hope this helps you a little bit about how to find evidence. Again, we've looked at this before, but also that idea of answering the question, which is probably more important to most of you. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.